You're staring at a list of home theater speaker bundles and wondering if you're about to drop a lot of cash on something that will just end up gathering dust. I get that hesitation. The last thing you want is a set of massive floor standers that sound great on paper but turn your living room into a cavern of unused gear. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's walk through the Klipsch RP-8000F II 5.1 bundle the way a real-world buyer would, and see whether it actually earns a spot in your setup or if you'd be better off with something smaller. First off, what you're looking at is a full-featured 5.1 system, 2 RP-8000F II floor-standing speakers, an RP-504 CII center channel, a pair of RP-600 bookshelf speakers for the surrounds, and the RP-1200SW 12-inch powered subwoofer. It's the kind of package that promises theater-level immersion, but the question is how it behaves once it's in the room you actually live in. I started by thinking about room size. The RP-8000F II floor standers are 42 inches tall, with a fairly wide cabinet to accommodate Klipsch's horn-loaded tweeter and a 12-inch woofer. In a medium to large living room, around 300 square feet or more, they sit comfortably and can fill the space without needing to crank the receiver to max. In my own test apartment, which is about 250 square feet, the bass from the subwoofer was a bit too forward. You could feel the low end vibrating the coffee table even at moderate volume. If you're dealing with a smaller room, you'll either have to tame the sub with the built-in phase and crossover controls or consider a less aggressive bass driver. One of the first practical things I noticed is how easy the speakers are to get up and running. The horns on the RP-8000F II and the RP-600 give you a very clear, forward soundstage right out of the box, so you don't need a ton of tweaking to hear dialogue clearly in a movie. The center channel, the RP-504 CII, is designed to anchor that dialogue, and it actually lives up to that promise. Even the quietest lines in a thriller stayed intelligible without pushing the volume. That's a real win for people who have to watch movies at lower levels because of late-night neighbors. Now, a lot of people ask whether a 5.1 bundle like this will handle music as well as movies. The RP-600 surrounds are bookshelf speakers that lean more toward accurate mid-range reproduction than the flashy big room sound some other surround drivers chase. When I streamed a jazz record through the whole system, the horns gave the brass a crisp snap while the sub added just enough depth to make the double bass feel present without overpowering. It's not a dedicated hi-fi setup, but it's surprisingly versatile for a package that's primarily marketed for home theater. A practical strength that often gets overlooked is how the system integrates with a typical AV receiver. All of the speakers are 8 ohm, and the RP-1200SW sub has a built-in 300 watt amp, so you won't need a separate sub-amplifier. However, the floor standers are fairly demanding. To hit their full dynamic range, you'll want a receiver that can deliver at least 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms. If you're planning to use a modest 2-channel stereo amp or a low-powered entry-level receiver, you'll likely feel the floor standers sounding a bit thin, especially during action sequences with booming explosions. In other words, the bundle expects a decent receiver, not a cheap budget model. Another thing I kept an eye on is aesthetics. The ebony finish is sleek and looks great against dark walls, but the cabinets are deep enough that you need a little clearance from the back wall to avoid muffling the low frequencies. In a tight setup, you might have to push the floor standers forward a few inches, which can slightly shift the sweet spot and affect imaging. That's not a deal-breaker, but it's a hidden trade-off that shows up when you're trying to fit the system into a cramped media console. So, who should actually consider buying this bundle? If you've already got a solid AV receiver with enough power, a dedicated home theater room or a spacious living area, and you enjoy watching movies, gaming with immersive sound, or listening to music with a bit of theatrical flair, the Klipsch RP-8000F II 5.1 set gives you a plug-and-play level of performance that's hard to match at this price point. The horn-loaded tweeters deliver that signature Klipsch clarity that makes dialogue pop, and the subwoofer adds the kind of low-end punch that makes a soundtrack feel cinematic. For anyone who's ready to invest a few $100s more for that extra sense of immersion, the value comes from the cohesive design. The speakers are tuned to work together, so you spend less time chasing EQ settings and more time enjoying the content. On the flip side, if you live in a small apartment, you're sensitive to bass rumble, or you're on a tight budget, you might want to skip this bundle. A compact soundbar with a wireless sub can deliver decent surround effects without the need for precise speaker.